So hey guys, it's been a few weeks since I last posted any updates on my PhD progress, life updates, so let's catch up. So today we will talk about my end of term results, beginning my first PhD project, record keeping, and a mini side project that I undertook over the weekend, writing my first Obsidian plugin for WordPress. In the summary, in the past 4 weeks, I've been building the infrastructure, both intellectual and digital, that hopefully will serve me for the next few years, both in my PhD work and in my science communication and tech communication work, helping me to be a bit more efficient in both. So first, a quick semester recap. I got all my grades back, and I'm pretty happy with the results. So I took 2 classes. I'm really happy to say that I got an A+ in my Nuclear Imaging Techniques of Magnetic Materials class, which was really helpful and super relevant to my research interests. And in classical electrodynamics, I got a B, which I'm okay with. I think it could have been a little better, maybe B+, if I put in a little more work, but I'm still okay with it because I was kind of under a lot of pressure last term. Now that makes 2 classes down, and I have 1 more class to take throughout the rest of my PhD program. It feels good to be making a steady progress. Now a quick update on the paper I mentioned in my last video, the one based on my master's work. So I submitted it to the journal a few weeks ago, I think about a month ago, and honestly I wasn't even sure if it would make past the editor check. Not to mention peer review, but it did. And last Friday I got the comments back from the reviewers, and generally the comments were quite encouraging and positive. Both reviewers recommended my paper for publication, but with major revisions. So it's not a done deal yet, but it's probably the most uplifting email I've gotten in the last few weeks. And this is what I'm doing right now, working on making changes to the paper, getting more data, more figures, changing the narrative a little bit, and working under the tight deadline because I was given 3 weeks to complete all the changes. And I know it takes me usually a long time to write something nice. That's probably the toughest part, writing things up in a way that is not dense and understandable. And despite all the major changes I need to make to the paper, I'm still genuinely excited. I'm genuinely happy because the feedback was very thought out, and I'm happy to make changes so that the paper can see the world finally. It's been a big morale boost, and it means I might be published first author soon. So from the moment of submission to the day I received the feedback, it took about a month. And within that month, I was not idle either. I've been working on the early stages of my first PhD project, and by early I mean no code has been written yet. For now, this is the scoping phase. Reading, thinking, asking questions. What is it that I want to study next? And the big question I was circling around actually dates back to 1948. A Princeton researcher, Walter Kotzman, asked something deceptively simple. If you cooled a liquid slowly enough, could it avoid crystallizing or becoming a glass? Or in other words, could a liquid ever remain a liquid if it's been cooled very slowly, way below 0? And just to clarify, when I say glass, I don't mean glass in your windows. In physics, a glass is a kind of material that's somewhere between a liquid and a solid. It has the disorder of a liquid, but mechanically it behaves as a solid. And whether or not a system becomes a glass depends on how it's cooled down and what dynamics are at play. And it turns out that that question opened a decades-long discussion about phase transitions, entropy, and disorder. And while it started with things like water, it applies to other systems too, including spin glasses and magnetic nanoparticles. But despite the 75 years of effort, there are still questions not fully resolved regarding this matter, no pun intended. But we have tools now that they didn't have back then. We have high performance computing, we have powerful GPUs, we have machine learning, and I'm cautiously hopeful that with those tools, we can answer at least some of the questions that are still outstanding in this area. And somewhere along the way, I also understood that I need a good system for keeping track of everything that I read, everything I think about, our discussions, notes on papers, everything that belongs to the research journal. And I discovered Obsidian. I've been using Notion for a while. I've also been using OneNote throughout my master's, but I was never really happy with the system. And I've heard a lot about Obsidian lately. I finally decided to take a look what it looks like. And honestly, I really loved what I saw. Obsidian just felt right. So it's local first. You can sync it across devices if you need to, but I only have a desktop version at the moment, and I'm okay with this. I like the interface. It's very clean, and it sort of disappears in the background so that whatever you are writing actually stands out. It's simplicity and flexibility that won me over. You can have code snippets in there, you can write LaTeX in there, insert figures, whatever you can do with any modern note-taking system. So now I'm slowly building my research journal in Obsidian. And not only that, I write my YouTube scripts there, I write my blog posts there, and I keep record of anything interesting that I learn. And since I decided to do SciComm a little more seriously, I also realized that some of my notes that I keep for myself, anything new that I learn, be it on the high-performance computing, GPU computing, coding, anything physics related, anything that can be useful to other people, ideally I would like it to see published, either as a script or maybe a blog post. And therefore I decided to turn some of my Obsidian notes into WordPress blog posts. Which brings me to a mini project that I tackled over the last weekend, where I built my first Obsidian plugin for publishing my Obsidian notes to my WordPress website. Now, I really didn't mean to write a plugin. I really didn't. As I thought of the long term, I didn't want to be copy-pasting my notes from Obsidian to WordPress all the time. I wanted to find a way to publish my written notes from Obsidian to WordPress was just a click of a button. And not just publish, but also update them, because as the time goes on, sometimes some notes, I keep adding to them. And I wanted to find a way that lets me update them very easily in real time, like the existing blog post, without having to republish a new blog post. And so I started poking around how that can be done. I found a couple plugins that could publish to, actually one. I found one plugin that can publish Obsidian notes to WordPress, but I can't seem to update the same note to the same blog post. And I told myself, how hard can it be to build a tool that can do that? Surely it can't be that difficult. It kind of was and wasn't. Like, I had no prior experience doing any dev work, like anything that had to do with writing plugin, using TypeScript or JavaScript or Node.js. I've never touched this stuff. I didn't even know how that worked. But nowadays we have incredible tools to help us with this. You know, I had a clear idea in mind. I knew what I wanted, and with the help of ChatGPT and Google, I made it work. And I think nowadays it's not a crime to use AI to build useful things that can actually help you in your workflow without having to spend weeks and months on building that tool. Honestly, it took me about 24 hours with a couple of breaks to get it to work. And I'm planning to write a blog post that describes how I've done it step by step, what I had to pay attention, what errors I had to overcome to get it to work. And at the moment, it is just a local, my private plugin, but I do plan to polish it a little bit, put it on GitHub, and ask Obsidian team to review it so that it can become a community plugin. And over time, I also hope to expand it to be able to publish SVG notes or drawings, because my Obsidian has this extension that's called ExcaliDraw, which I sometimes use for visual note-taking, something like this here. And those are SVG files if you export them, and or PDFs, but SVG just looks nice. It's zoomable without the loss of quality. And so I wanted some of my blog pages to look like this. And as I add to my drawings, I also wanted them to be updatable to the same page on my website. And so that part I still have to implement. It's a little more involved. There are tools that can do that, but they cannot do it to WordPress. You have to have a separate domain and Cloudflare account for this to work. It's free, but it's I still love my WordPress site. And I want this to work with WordPress. And so unless I discover something that I cannot overcome, I'm gonna keep trying. So if you've been waiting for updates, thank you for sticking around. This is what I've been up to in the last 4 weeks-ish. I will keep sharing any updates about the things I learn, about the tools I build, and just some stories. Thank you. Bye.